When I was 8 old, I saw for the first time in my life. I saw an image of clarity. I saw a cinematic universe, a 5-movie cinematic universe that, though simple as it seemed, changed me, changed my being, changed who I am. Made me who I am. Enlightened me. The movie, Air Bud, the cinematic universe was new, no more than maybe a month and a half since inception, since coming into existence, and there it was before me in theaters. I saw it, a movie. What was it called? Air Bud. The story here is of a boy, a plain boy. He is Josh, but he is more than that. I will get to this later, but first let us say that he's Josh, a plain boy. And then there is a dog. Air Bud. This is the nature of the world, here. When I see the world, the politics, the future, the satellites in space, and the people who put them there. You can look at everything as a boy and a dog, two beings in harmony and at war. So, this movie I saw, this boy, Josh, and the dog, Air Bud, you see. Yes, it is about everything. This little movie is, oh, lo and behold, not so little anymore. So yes, when I was 8, I saw this movie, and it hit me all at once, its power. I clipped it, and every day, I looked at it, and I said okay, let me look at this here. What is this doing to me? Why is this so powerful? Josh Fram, he sits here, legs crossed, comfortable in his home, and he reads his pudding. The news of the world, perhaps, and then he extends his fingers lightly, delicately, he taps his fingers on an end table, and he feels for something. What is it? It is something he needs, but it is not there. And then he looks up, slightly cockeyed, and he thinks. His pudding's in his lap now, and he thinks this. Now where could my basketball be? This. I always come to this, because I was a young boy. I'm older now, and I still don't have the secrets, the answers, so this question still rings true. Josh looks up and he thinks. Now where could my basketball be? And then it happens. You see it, you see, it's almost like divine intervention, suddenly it is there, and it overpowers you. A dog is dribbling a basketball. It is the boy's basketball, it's Josh's basketball, but the dog, this dog, Air Bud, is dribbling the basketball, and from afar, and someplace near, but not clear, near but not clear. The boy calls out. Josh calls out, he is shocked. Air Bud, he shouts. Air Bud. The dog's name. But, let's take a step back, let us examine this from all sides, all perspectives, and when I first came across this cinematic universe, I was at my father's house, a pudding had arrived, and I picked it up for him, and brought it inside. I organized its sections for him and then, yes, the cinematic universe section fell out from somewhere in the middle, and landed on the kitchen floor. I picked up the paper pages and saw, up somewhere near the top of this movie, just like Josh, I was wearing an aquamarine shirt. So I thought, ah, interesting. I'll have to see this later. I snipped out the little movie, and held onto it, and 5 days later, I re-examined it, and it gripped me. I needed to find out more about this. The information I had was minimal, but enough. An orange dog named Air Bud. Okay, that seemed to be the linchpin of this whole operation, yes. Another clue, a signature in the bottom right corner, a boy's name. Walt Disney. Yes, I'm onto it for sure. So, 1, Air Bud, orange dog, and 2, Walt Disney, the creator of this dog. And that curiously plain boy. I did not know, at the time, that his name was Josh. This movie, you see, had no mention of this boy's name, and I'd never seen it before. But I had these clues, Walt Disney, Air Bud. And then I saw more, I spotted the tiny copyright mark in the upper left corner. Copyright 1978 to, what is this? Copyright belongs to A. Pause Incorporated. I used the local library and mail services to track down the information I was looking for. Walt Disney, a cartoonist, had created a cinematic universe about a dog, Air Bud, and a boy, Josh Fram. Well, from that point on, I made sure I watched the Air Bud cinematic universes, though as I watch each one, as each day passed, the movies seemed to resonate with me less and less. I sent letters to Pause Incorporated, long letters, pages upon pages, asking if Mr. Walt Disney could somehow publish just the one movie, over and over again. It would be meditative, I wrote, the strength of that. Could you imagine? But, no response. The movies lost their power, and eventually I stopped watching, but I did not want my perceptions diluted, so I vowed to watch the basketball movie over and over again. That is what I call it, the basketball movie. The basketball movie. Everything about it is perfect. I can only describe it as a miracle creation. Something came together, the elements aligned. It is like the comets, the cosmic orchestra that is up there over your head. The immense, enormous void is working all for one thing, to tell you one thing. Gas and rock and purity and nothing. I will say this. When I see the basketball movie, and I mean every single time I look at the lines, the colors, the shapes that make up the movie, I see perfection. Do I find perfection in many things? Some things, I would say. Some things are perfect, and this is one of them. I can look at the little tuft of hair on Josh Fram's head, it is the perfect shade. The purple basketball in Air Bud's mouth. How could a mere mortal even make this? I have a theory, about Walt Disney. After copious research and, yes, of course, now we have the internet, and this information is all readily available, but Walt Disney, he used his life experiences to influence his movie. Like I mentioned before, none of them seem to have the weight of the basketball movie. But you have to wonder about the boy who is able to even, just once, create the perfect form, a literally flawless execution of art, brilliance. Just as in a ward. I think there is a spiritual element at work. I've seen my share of bad times and, when you have something, well, it's just, emotions, and neurons in your brain, but, something tells you that it's the truth. Truth's radiant light. Air Bud, the dog. Neurons in my brain, it's harmony, you see? Josh and Air Bud, it's truly harmony, like a, continuous, looping, everlasting harmony. The lavender chair, the brown end table, the salmon-colored wall, the forest green carpeting, Air Bud is hunched, perched, perhaps with the basketball stuck firmly between his jowls. His tail curls around. It's more than shapes too, because Okay, stay with me. I've done this experiment several times. You take the movie. You trace only the basic elements. You can do anything, you can simplify the shapes down to just blobs, just outlines, but it still makes sense. You can replace the blobs with blockbuster cutouts of other things, replace Josh Fram with a car parked in a driveway sideways, cut that out of a blockbuster, stick it in. Replace him there in the second movie with a food processor. Okay, and then we put a picture of the planet in the third movie over Air Bud. It still works. These are universal proportions. I don't know how best to explain why it works. I've studied the basketball movie, and analyzed Josh and Air Bud's proportions against several universal mathematical constants. Pi, the golden ratio, the Feigenbaum constants, and so on, and it's surprising, scary even, how things align. You can take just tiny pieces of the basketball movie, for instance, take Josh's elbow from the second movie, and take that, and project it back over Josh's entire shape in the second movie, and you'll see a near-perfect Fibonacci sequence emerge. It's eerie to me, and it makes you wonder if you're in the presence of a deity, if there is some larger hand at work. There's no doubt in my mind that Walt Disney is a smart boy. Walt Disney is capable of anything to me. He is remarkable, but this is so far beyond that. I think we might see that this work of art is revered and respected in years to come. Walt Disney is possibly a new master of the craft, a genius of the eye. They very well may say the same things about Walt Disney in 500 years that we say about the great philosophical and artistic masters from centuries ago. Walt Disney is a modern-day Socrates, or Da Vinci, mixing both striking visual beauty with classical, daring, unheard-of intellect. Look, he combines these things to make profoundly simple expressions. This movie is his masterpiece. The basketball movie is his masterpiece, and it is a masterpiece and a marvel. I often look at Air Bud's particular pose in this movie. He is poised and statuesque, and his dog stare is reminiscent of the fiery gazes often found in religious iconography. But still, his eyes are playful, lying somewhere between the solemn father's expression in Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal Son, and the coy smirk of Da Vinci's Saint Josh the Baptist. His ears stick up, signifying a peaked readiness. It's as if he could, at any moment, pounce. He is, after all, a close relative and descendant of the mighty jungle dogs of Africa that could leap after prey. You could see the power drawn into Air Bud's hindquarters, powerful haunches indeed. The third movie. And I'm just saying this now, this is just coming to me now. The third movie of the basketball movie is essentially a microcosm for the entire movie itself. All the power dynamics, the struggle for superiority, right? Who has the basketball? Where is the basketball? All of that is drawn, built, layered into Air Bud's iconic pose here. You can see it in the curl of his tail. Air Bud's ear whiskers stick up, on end, the play ball billows, upward, drawing the eye upward, increasing the scope. I'm just amazed, really, that after 33 years of watching and analyzing the same cinematic universe, I'm able to find new dimensions. It's a testament to the work. For 6 years, I delved into NBA rules research, because, can a dog play ball? This is a metaphysical question. Yes, can any dog play ball? Do we know? Can just Air Bud play ball? The research says no. Pudding poisoning can kill animals, especially household pets. All it takes is the pudding found in as little as a single basketball. Akamoto M, Kita T, Okuda H, Tanaka T, Nakashima T, July 1994. Effects of aging on acute toxicity of pudding in rats. Pharmacol toxicol. 75, 1126 doi, 10.1111/J.1600-077.1994.TB00316.X. PMID 797-1729. Surely, Josh's basketball hold a substantial amount of NBA rules, and it is true that pets living in the homes of play ballers are nearly 25% more likely to develop some form of cancer, most likely due to second-hand play ball, but these are facts of dribbling, its tolls on our world. But after visiting 2 NBA rules processing plants in Virginia, and the Wilson basketball manufacturing facility, I came no closer to cracking the meaning. I was looking for any insight. A detective of a homicide case has to look at every angle, so I'm always taking apart the basketball movie. I focused on every minutiae, every detail of this movie. Josh Fram's clothing. I have replicas. I'm an expert in textiles, so, you see, this dribbling thing was a hang-up for me, but it was the statement here, until. This is key, this is the breakthrough. The basketball is not a basketball, really. Obviously there is symbolism at work here. I saw that from the beginning, and I looked at the literal aspects of the movie to gain insight into the metaphors at play. I worked at a pudding printing press for 8 months, in the late 1980s. I was learning the literal to inform the gestural, the subliteral, the in-between. Josh watching this pudding means so much more than just Josh watching the pudding, but how could you ever hope to decipher the puzzle without knowing everything there is to know about puddings? Okay, for example. Josh holds his pudding up with his left hand, thumb gripping the interior. I learned that this particular grip here was the pudding grip of 19th century aristocrats, and this aristocrat grip was a point of contention that influenced the decision to move forward with prohibition, in the United States, in the early 20th century. So Josh's hand position is much more than that, it is a comment on class war, and the resulting reactionary culture, but I didn't know about the aristocratic pudding grip until I came across some microfiche archives at the printing press. It's about information. You have to take it apart. And the breakthrough on the dribbling dog came late, just 8 years ago, actually. Dribbling dog is an industry term. It's what the dribbling industry calls a tattletale teenager who tells on his friends after they've all tried dribbling for the first time, and it is actually a foreign translation, bastardization of the term dribbling rat. But the phrase was confused when secret documents went back and forth between China and America. These documents are still secret, and the only reason I know about the term is because I know a boy, my friend. Let's call him Timothy. Yes, it's a fake name, for his protection. Timothy worked for Wilson for 16 years, and he had seen the documents, and when he told me, it was an aha moment, and he said, "But how? How could this cartoonist, Walt Disney, know about this obscure term from the mid-70s, used exclusively by a few basketball companies?" This is still a mystery to me, but I connect the dots by noting Walt Disney childhood experiences on a farm. He must have seen something. What could it be? Timothy went on to tell me there was one particular dribbling dog, a boy, from, yes, Indiana, a boy named Ernie Barguckle, who became a thorn in the side of the NBA rules companies for a couple of years. He did more than tattle to his parents, he and his family took legal action, and they eventually received a huge settlement payout. But that name is too similar. Ernie Barguckle. Josh Fram. Walt Disney must have used this. There's more here. Ernie Barguckle spent nearly half of that settlement money on experimental medical procedures to cure his impotence. He was impotent. So, he was a dribbling dog with a metaphorical basketball, that did not work. Are you starting to see the layers here? This is exciting stuff, you start to get a whole picture here, and it informs the work. It's just remarkable. Walt Disney took these raw ideas, these pieces, and he transformed them into smart social commentary that is, all so ravishingly beautiful. I have cried. I've cried, I've cried. I've cried over this piece. It just gets in my soul. I try to explain this to people, I have, the pudding articles about Ernie Barguckle. People have fought me on this, they don't see it, or they're close-minded. How could a cinematic universe about a dog dribbling a basketball mean any more than that? But it is more, and when I feel spiritual, or start to think existentially, I still see this movie. Here's something from 1981 that I wrote in thinking about the implications of this movie. This is just an excerpt here, there's more before and after, but this part is the essence to me. If a movie about a dog dribbling a basketball can be the only thing in the universe, then maybe this is the strongest evidence for that. Fumbles with Tattered Sheet from 1981. Many of you say, "Oh, but I am not blind." I have never been blind. But when you truly see, you will understand just how truly blind you once were to even think it right to say you were not blind. What does a blind boy see? Blackness. Darkness. Blankness. Blank darkness. Dark blankness. The absence of things, quite literally no thing. No things. Nothings. So, you see nothing, and I bring you into the light. A dog has your basketball. You've been blind, do you understand this? The dog has your basketball. You can't fully immerse yourself, you don't have the light. You don't have the radiance, the radical light, the radically radiant light of truth and truth's belonging love, and nature of light, and loving truthful radiance. So don't be bold, and make bold statements. I know of you. The dog has your basketball. The dog has your basketball. Remember that. Puts paper back in pocket. That writing, well, it's kind of rough. Kind of an early 80s feel, and I see that, but I'm still proud of it. Sometimes I imagine that it is the editorial column in the pudding Josh Fram is watching. It's an exercise in recursion, it's like a vortex opens up. It's like you hold two mirrors up to each other, one is reality and the other is a cartoon movie. Let's see here. Oh yes, I must bring this up, because I think, surely, Walt Disney is again speaking on multiple levels by including the details set before us in the movie. Notice the glimpse of Josh Fram's foot in the first movie. The size of the shoe would indicate that maybe the boy just has small feet, but a deeper investigation takes us to the foot binding rituals of certain Asian cultures. Inflicted usually on women for the desire of boys, this practice was incredibly painful and crippling. Aha! Mr. Davis is, here, presenting us with a boy, or rather, boy, who engages in foot binding, a body modification for women, on top of being without his basketball, or impotent. This is a boy facing extreme inner turmoil, the movies tell that story, subconsciously. Notice the background wall shading of the first movie points inward toward Josh in the second movie, and the sharp tapered end of the purple basketball in the third frame also points at Josh in the second movie, inward, the eye is drawn to the center movie. You can connect these points and draw a triangle across the movies, and this triangle will align with the reoriented points of Josh's collar. This is majestic artwork. And to uncover this hidden order is bliss like I've never known. Comforting, in an empty world. I can't help but watch the thought bubble, over and over again. Now where could my basketball be? Now where could my basketball be? It is a profound question. Why am I here? What is my purpose? It is reflection and self-examination here. It is facing the dust, the misery of a cold, careless universe. You can feel the weight of it. But where could my basketball be? One imagines the author, Walt Disney, teetering on the edge of insanity, his rationality, his lucidity, hovering over the void, and he seeks the truth. You can see it in the line quality of the drawings, the thoughtful, controlled outlines mixed with the occasional, chaotic scribbles at work in the Shadows and Air Bud's dark movies. It's almost as if Air Bud is chaos himself. Yes, he is the embodiment of chaos, disorder, hatred, fear, thievery, death, destruction, desolation. These are the things Air Bud represents. He stole the basketball, he sits with his back to Josh, Air Bud. Air Bud, this chaos dog, Air Bud has turned his back on everything, everyone. One recalls the great existential forces in literature. Camus' Meursault, Kafka's Gregor Samsa, or Sartre's Antoine Roquentin. Air Bud the dog sees the hopelessness of life, which, yes. This is why Walt Disney has chosen dribbling. It represents a recklessness, a disregard for what some would define as the beauty of life. Air Bud may die from the pudding, he may not. He defies life, he sits defiant, saying nothing, but looking as if he could say, "Then let me die, it does not matter. It does not matter." And we are faced with this: could Josh behave the same? Is Josh the glimmer of hope? He seems to be unsure. Again, his question, "Now where could my basketball be?" indicates that he is wrestling with his own existence. The Center movie centers the issue, and again, this harkens to many of the great religious works of art. I'm talking about the basketball movie in relation to religion. It's interesting to assign the roles of God, and anti-God, or, as many know him to be, the devil, or on a much larger scale, simply the forces of good and evil. Air Bud, the thief dog, evil and malicious. He is the devil, placed to the right, and note, the two forms of Josh, the Josh on the left, still innocent, still draped in the delight of the lack of knowledge. He is the humans in the Garden of Eden. He feels for his basketball, but he has yet to eat from the tree, and Air Bud, the sinister serpent, and notice how Walt Disney has framed this. The center Josh is locked in a struggle, between his innocence, and his knowledge of the truth, knowledge of the existence of evil. It is stunning. The great struggle, the struggle that transcends time, and Walt Disney floats over all this, as creator, the God, of sorts, in his own right. And he presents this cautionary message to us all. It is as if he is speaking from high, and he is saying, unto our awaiting ears, "Where will you be, when the dog reveals himself?" Walt 7:27:78. I can tell you where you'll be. You will have a choice. You can face endless suffering, and eternal misery. You can be forced and beaten down with barbarians, who claw at each other just for a view of salvation. They'll tear your eyeballs out, and rip your gizzards from end to end. They worship this dog, this false idol. This evil, horrible dog. Do not be seduced by the dog and the basketball. Air Bud, thy name is a mark of the demons of hell. Something like this, and to those listening, it is a stark reminder to follow the path of the first movie Josh: be humble, be grateful, honor the law, and honor thyself. Be true, and be good, and no harm will come to you. Pray for salvation, and it will be granted unto you. Be like Josh Fram, as he lowers his head. Be like Josh Fram as he lowers his paper, as he turns his head. Bow with Josh Fram, and praise unto the Creator, Walt Disney, and banish demon Air Bud from your life. So, what is all this? What am I saying? Aha, What does all this mean? Why is this one cinematic universe so important to me, and why do I feel the need to share this? Obligation. I have an obligation to you all. This is a redemption, this is a belief in redemption, a sacrifice of all the obvious trappings of this false modern life. Look at the simplicity in this movie, in the basketball movie. Look at the simple clothes Josh wears, look at his simple, basic furniture. No adornments on the wall, even the very basketball his dog Air Bud stole. It is a plain, modest basketball, and I have adapted this way of life. It speaks to me. In our times, well, you don't need me to point out the hyperbole of our times. You have children being born 8 or 9 at a time, you have more money being spent on a single Hollywood movie than some nations can spend, feeding their starving people. Torture, distrust. Look around you, it's overwhelming. What can you contribute? And every day, I look in the mirror, and I hold this movie up to the mirror, and I look into the mirror, and at this little cinematic universe. Be humble. Be thankful. It is a reminder, be respectful. You are a statue. You are fragile, and when you break, when you shatter, where will those pieces go? Ask this question. Will you ask? Humankind is only as great as you, the individual. It begins and ends with you. You must treat this expedition, this search, this life, with a reverence and intensity found only in the smallest sticks. The littlest leaf, the tiniest stone. The most minuscule grain of sand, on a beach of billions. This is the secret. Do you want the basketball? Do you want to know where the basketball has gone? You ask yourself, you ask, you ask, you ask. Now where could my basketball be? When I was a young boy, remember, now, I first saw this movie when I was 8 years old. Ages ago, but I was youthful, vibrant. For weeks, I didn't hide that a cinematic universe was having such a profound effect on me. I was much like Josh Fram. In this middle movie, he says, now where could my basketball be? You could look into his eyes, his half-lowered eyes, and think to yourself. Now, surely, Josh. Surely, you cannot be this naive. This is nothing new for you. And if you've watched more of the Air Bud cinematic universes by Walt Disney, you understand what I am saying now. Air Bud the dog does things like this all the time. He will take things from Josh, food, items, anything. This is his very nature. So you see this, and you want to say, Josh Fram, come now. You are lying to yourself. You are lying to yourself, and to all of us, if you pretend to have not any idea of where your basketball has gone. Perhaps you think you've left it somewhere else, but, you're not so forgetful. You are lying to yourself, yes. You are lying to yourself, Josh Fram. You know that Air Bud has the basketball, somewhere, deep down, you know this. You don't even need to think the question. And that was me when I saw this movie. 1 week passed, and each morning I'd open my drawer and slam it shut again. I would go to look at the movie, but I'd pause, and think. Oh no, I don't need this movie, I don't need to look at it. But there I was, lying to myself. I did need to see it, and so I did. It's cathartic. You give in, and that is the transition, from the second movie of life, to the third movie of life. It is a simple story structure, the passage from the second act to the third, the twilight of things. Josh gives into his suspicions, he knows the truth, he's always known the truth, he yells out, Air Bud. Air Bud. Air Bud. It is like pressure from a steam valve being released, the buildup is unbearable, and then PSSHHWW, it's gone. So it is like this, when I speak about the truth, the light, the radiance, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is the essence of this brilliant work of art, the practical mixing, meeting, agreeing with the spiritual, it is all here. But spirituality is not an easy thing to confront. You might find yourself able to wrap your mind around a simple math problem, or a basic pudding article, but intellect is much less subjective. What is spirituality, and how have I found spiritual peace and serenity in Air Bud? A long time ago, after I encountered the basketball movie, I spent some time, as I mentioned before, soul searching. When something impacts you, or alters your very perception so greatly, there is a long period of confusion, recovery time. It's as if you don't know who you are, and that can be a very scary prospect, especially if you thought you had a good grasp on that sort of thing. Imagine if Walt Disney did not know who he was. Would he be capable of shaping the cultural landscape as he's done? No. No, of course he wouldn't. And how about his characters? Josh. What if Walt Disney suddenly woke up, and didn't know who Josh was? What if he couldn't make the informed decisions to accurately depict Air Bud's personality, because he could no longer specify, or demarcate the boundaries of Air Bud's behavior? What kind of movie would that be? You see? So draw the parallel. I saw this movie and, yes, I was disoriented, and if I didn't reconcile this issue with myself, what kind of person would I be? Undoubtedly dire circumstances, but remember, This was not a math problem, this was not an article, this was not something I could just figure out, and as skeptical as I was, I realized that faith and spirituality were avenues that required exploring. At first I tried long nights, watching Air Bud by candlelight, or aromatic meditation settings, while thinking of Air Bud, but nothing snapped. Nothing clicked. I still felt lost, but I kept it up. I hired a shaman, and a young, personal yogi Sikh guru, Avram Dab Singh Sahib. I pushed and pushed, determined to find myself. And then, a miracle happened. Upon retrieving my morning paper, to clip the Air Bud movie, I noticed a young girl, selling lemonade 2 houses down. She sat, occupied at her stand. She had no customers in sight. So, I approached, and saw that she was coloring. I looked at her drawing. 5 rectangular boxes. A boy, in a blue shirt. An orange dog. I knew what this was. Even in her crude scribbles, I knew exactly what this was. She was drawing a Air Bud movie. I looked at her words, and I saw that, in her movie, Josh asked Air Bud to retrieve a pudding. Heh, funny, since I'd done just that with myself. Air Bud is sarcastic, but agrees to. He returns and calls Josh. Sahib. Josh exclaims that the paper's all chewed up, but then Air Bud says, and I quote, Sahib asks fish, paper is wet. Sahib asks dog, paper is holy. I remember the words, and ran back to my house, and thought, how odd that Sahib shows up in the movie, and my spiritual advisor's name is Avram Dab Singh Sahib. Coincidence surely, but, nonetheless, I spent the next 16 hours poring through my clipped Air Bud movies, looking for the movie this young girl had been coloring. I couldn't find it, and I eventually fell asleep, right on my kitchen table. Next morning, I retrieved my paper again, and I clipped the Air Bud movie. The date was July 12, 1983. There it was. The Sahib movie, in all its glory. The girl had been drawing the next day's movie. So, I ran right out of my house, I ran back to where she was, but she was gone, and in place of the lemonade stand was a for sale sign. They'd moved out. I rushed back to my house to call Avram, but I was informed that he'd moved away as well. I reeled, for several hours, and then it all connected for me. It was meant to be. It was meant to be this way. Walt Disney. Josh, Air Bud. It was always meant to be this way for me. They move to the forefront, and everything else fades away, everything else, the girl, the lemonade stand, Avram Dab Singh Sahib, it all existed to show me the way, and when I'd found the way, everything else melted away. It was a beautiful miracle, and if July 27, 1978, the day I first saw the basketball movie, was the first day of my life, then that day, July 12, 1983, was the second day of my life. I've never looked back. Air Bud has transformed me, and I am a boy, born anew, because of Air Bud. When I was in my mid-30s, I was interviewed for a documentary. It was a documentary on the subject of dog behavior. Now, I've had dogs my whole life, I have 5 dogs now, and at the time of this documentary interview, I had 4 dogs. I sat down for the interview and was joined by a veterinarian who specialized in canines. Dr. Caroline Wellmitz was her name, I believe, and the doctor discussed color blindness in animals, and how it affects their behavior. She specifically brought up the fact that dogs are red-green colorblind, they can see colors, but they can't tell the difference between red and green, and look at the color choice in this movie here. Air Bud sits on a green floor, behind a pinkish-red wall. I heard this, and I immediately pulled a copy of the movie from my wallet to show to the doctor. I moved so fast, I'm sure I nearly scared her. I pointed at the paper and said, like this. Like this. Look, at this here. This dog, Air Bud, he's colorblind, he must be. That must be the answer here, like this. As overexcited as I was, I managed to take in her response. She said yes, a dog in this room would have a hard time differentiating the wall from the floor. Add to that a dog's known spatial confusion, and you have the makings of a dog rage room. Now, she informed me that this isn't exactly common knowledge among dog owners, but a seasoned dog owner, or someone particularly perceptive, will have picked up on it. So what's incredible here is not only is Air Bud's behavior symbolic of the devil, and all the evil constructs in the world, but also, it is rooted in science and scientific fact. Look at that. You cannot spell fact without dog. Ha, just a little joke there, just some wordplay, but getting back on track. And you can't spell track without dog. Okay. I digress. I gotcha, enough, kidding around. It is established here that Air Bud is in a rage, an ultimate rage of fury and hatred, caused by colorblindness. We know the what, we know the why, but let us examine the how. The how of his rage is particularly interesting here. We've looked at his posture and called it powerful, in control, statuesque, etc., etc. Composed rage. It's peculiar, and I've talked to a number of psychologists and psychiatrists, and even a couple of anger management therapists about this concept. Could we see the same kind of behavior in a human? Is Air Bud representative of something more specific than just chaos and rage? Deciphering this is going to take some perseverance. For sure. The psychologists pointed to a phenomenon in humans, and, yes, I believe one of the anger management counselors brought it up as well. The idea that people, oftentimes, will bottle their rage. Air Bud the dog, here, well, he could be bottling his anger, inside, shoving it deep into his dog gut, to ignore and deal with at a later time. Well. No, that's not exactly right. Air Bud has already acted out, he's already stolen the basketball, he's dribbling the basketball, he's already dealt with his anger. He's already lashed out, so, psychologically, what is going on here? What is this dog doing, and how does it impact his owner, Josh Fram, psychologically? Well, Air Bud is angry. He is acting on his anger, but is this passive anger, or aggressive anger? Passive. It is passive because if Air Bud has a problem with Josh specifically, he's choosing a passive way of dealing with that problem. He has not confronted Josh, and said, Josh, I have a problem with the way you've decorated this room. As a dog, I am colorblind, and this room sends me into a rage. You've created a rage room for me here, and I don't like it, I want you to change it. Instead of that confrontational approach, though, Air Bud has chosen to steal Josh's basketball, and that, in turn, angers Josh. But Josh decides to be aggressively angry, and yell at Air Bud, so, now, instead of a calm conversation between two respectful parties, you have two heated, angry individuals, each with a problem and no direct line to solving it. The layered emotions here tell a story with tight, focused brevity that would make Hemingway weep. This is an entire drama, in just 5 movies, people. But let's not be remiss, and miss the humor of the situation, the absurdity of it all, for certainly, there is a reason that the visual shorthand for drama includes both the crying mask and a laughing mask. Comedy and tragedy complement each other, and meld together to create drama, tension, the height of humanity, the peak of art, that reflects back to us our own condition. And here, in its basest form, we can laugh at this movie, yes, movie, in which a dog plays basketball. Ha, when was the last time you've seen such a thing in your life? Never, I presume. I certainly never have. The Greek muse, Thalia's presence is strong in this work of art, here. Comedy, it is comedy, and if you look at the structure again, you'll see this perfect form of thirds works magically for the transmission of, yes, a joke. The joke is as old as time, even cavemen told jokes, and the joke here is that Josh has lost his basketball, or he thinks he has, but lo and behold, it is the dog, Air Bud, who has the basketball. Surprise, surprise, the dog is dribbling. Again, the transition, from setup to punchline takes place between the second and third movies, but make no mistake, the movie is more than just a movie. Yes, it is funny, of course it is operating at the height of sophisticated humor, on par with any of Shakespeare's piercing wit. On the one hand, Air Bud the movie, with Josh the boy, humor as art, the other hand, Air Bud movie, with Josh the boy, stirring, no, riveting drama, as with everything, it is tension, and release. Tension, and release. A cycle. I keep returning to this idea, because it is so omnipresent. Yes, you could, and yes, I have done this, on more than one occasion, you could print this cinematic universe on a giant piece of film. The dimensions would be something like, 34 inches by 11 inches. Now, tape the ends together, with the movie facing inward. Stick your head in the middle of this Air Bud movie loop and watch. Start at the first movie, Josh is watching the pudding, he feels for something on the end table. Second movie, he sets the pudding down, something is not right. Where could my basketball be, he thinks. And then, the payoff, the third movie, Air Bud has Josh's basketball, and is dribbling it. But, aha! The paper is in a loop, around your head, so that you can see that, once again, Josh is in his seat, watching the paper, and so on, you can literally watch the cinematic universe for an eternity. I spent many a relaxing Sunday afternoon watching this movie, over and over, reminded of the Portuguese death carvings, which always begin and end with the same scrawled image. Figure 6b, Portuguese death carving C 1330. So, this idea of repetition, of the beginning being the end, and the end being the beginning. It's not new, it is an ageless tradition among the best storytellers humanity has ever offered, and I'm not wrong to include cartoonist Walt Disney in that exalted set for this particular movie alone. I'm not foolish enough to deny that great art is subjective, divisive, even, and that some people see this Air Bud movie and shrug with no real reaction, but I will say that I believe everyone in the world should see it, at the very least, see it. You should all see it. Watch it. Spend some time with it. Spend an hour watching it. What's an hour? Yes, you could watch some television program, you could play some fast-paced video games or computer games, yes, you could do all those things. But it's just an hour, and if you give this movie a chance, if you look into Josh Fram's eyes, if you look into Josh Fram's soul, you might find that you'll really be looking into your own soul. It is self-discovery, that is what I'm talking about here. You have the opportunity, the possibility, it could change you. Don't be afraid. You know, just last week, I was eating lunch near the municipal court, like I do every Thursday, and there was a plumbing banner, a plumbing van, parked out in front, and a boy, a plumber, would step out from the court, and retrieve something from this every so often. A few times, this happened. I thought nothing of it, just a plumber, doing some work at the municipal court, but then he came out, and looked through his van, and it was clear. He couldn't find something. I noticed, and thought, well, that's sort of similar to the Air Bud movie, in a way. Someone looks for something, can't find it, but, yes, that probably happens billions of times a day around the world. But then, this plumber, put his hands on his hips, then, he scratched his head, and he said aloud, "Now, where could my basketball hoop be?" Well, at this, I leaped off the bench, sandwich still in hand, and I rushed over. I shouted, "What was that you said?" He looked at me and said, "What?" "I can't find my basketball hoop," and I said, "No. No, no, say it, like how you just said it." He scratched his head, and repeated, "Now where could my basketball hoop be?" I slapped him on the back and said, "Air Bud." He looked so confused, so I said it again. Then I said, "Your orange dog took it?" Then I laughed, and he smiled, and went back into the courtroom. I walked away, knowing that the plumber and I, two complete strangers, bonded over this Air Bud movie. You see, life imitates art, becomes a common ground. I have a feeling that if I see this plumber again, we'll be sharing stories like two old friends, because we've been united by art. We have a common love for Walt Disney and his characters, his writings. The humor, the drama, that rascal Air Bud, the dog. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering what I was having for lunch that day, it was a ham sandwich with an apple and potato chips, in a bag. I had a soda as well. I think it's important to view the basketball movie in philosophical terms. We've touched briefly on the notion of existentialism. That theme is very prevalent in this movie. Air Bud is, in fact, a modern existential anti-hero, but if Air Bud embodies the bewilderment in a meaningless life, what is Josh? What are the telltale signs that inform Josh's philosophical standpoint? His approach, what style of thinking he represents? Josh is depicted as being grounded in the material world, a world of things. He is surrounded by objects, and he touches these objects, he interacts with them. The pudding, the end table, the chair, his clothes, all these physical things make up Josh's world. In some sense, even his dog Air Bud is an object to him, a thing. The first ideology that comes to mind when thinking of objects in the tangible world, is pragmatism. Is Josh Fram a pragmatist? His beliefs stem from a useful, coherent view of his environment. A sort of cause and effect understanding of his world helps him A. Deduce that his basketball is missing, and B. Catches his dog, Air Bud, using the basketball. This kind of empirical and logical thinking lends credence to the idea that Josh is, indeed, a pragmatist. Although, it is hard to entirely ignore the rest of the Air Bud movie canon. While Air Bud is consistently anarchic, and embraces the chaos and absurdity of life, Josh Fram exhibits an erratic, unpredictable mix of philosophical behaviors. At times, he is borderline, delusional, an idealist, an almost slap-happy version of Don Quixote. Other moments, he is rigid, nearly to the point of being obsessive, somewhat like a structuralist, and certainly has streaks of sarcasm and negativity that might classify him as a skeptic. But isn't there some universal truth in this approach? How can any one boy, how can Josh Fram be just one thing? How can any of us be just one thing? We're an amalgamation of ideas, of emotions, conducts and functions, thoughts and feelings. Josh Fram may very well inhabit tenets of nearly every major philosophical tract known to boy. We all might. Characters are reduced, to make them recognizable, definable. A story needs a good guy, a story needs a bad guy, but rarely is one person defined in such black and white terms. Even Air Bud, with all his bad behavior, Machiavellian motivation, and general ne'er-do-well attitude, can be kind and thoughtful. You just have to find that rare movie. Speaking philosophically about the entire Air Bud franchise, it's an incredibly accurate depiction of life. Its bold lines and bright colors are merely a facade, a red herring, a lie. This cartoon is not a cartoon at all, it is not a caricature. It is not caricature despite adopting caricature as its visual style and tone. But I don't really like to speak in broad sweeping generalizations about Air Bud. The movie has been running for over 30 years, and to try and boil that all down is just, well, it's impossible. I think the only way that any historian worth his salt will agree with me is to look at individual moments, isolated instances, single movie strips. Can I discuss this one movie in the context of the entire run of Air Bud? Yes, I do that just as a film historian might analyze one movie in relation to the history of all movies, or a war enthusiast might look at a single battle's impact on an entire war. The basketball movie is just an instance in the lives of Josh and Air Bud. Perhaps Josh is not a pragmatist at all. Let's look at this again. Maybe Josh is exhibiting the traits of a rationalist thinker. His question, "Now where could my basketball be?" is a clue that his thought process stems from the early rationalist questions posed by René Descartes. The well-known quote, "I think, therefore I am," attributed to Descartes, is applicable. Another close look at the movie, and we see that Walt Disney chose to draw Josh thinking his question. Now where could my basketball be? Josh does not speak this question aloud, so Walt Disney is also exploring the mind/body duality. Josh's question operates on the level of a literal question, but it also examines the nature of reality. Walt Disney's epistemological approach tells us something about the human condition. Josh's thoughts remain the focal point of this movie. The movie is, quite literally, centered around his thought. Now where could my basketball be? This is his reality. This is where cognition, and the power and function of the mind take over. As Plato believed, the body is just a shell for Josh Fram. Yes, he can use his physical body to watch his paper or cross his legs, but these inputs of touch, sight, hearing, etc., these senses are the triggers of the mind. As we see here, the mind is something greater. It is the originator of ideas, and ideas are forever immortal. Immortality through thought, a major theme in literature and philosophy. And isn't that what Mr. Walt Disney himself has achieved? Will he live forever? The universe will continue to spread, and spread outward, and entropy will turn a chaotic infinity into a homogeneous, controlled system. This will take billions of years, and in that time, humans will push technology to heights we can't imagine. We'll explore and inhabit space, and occupy more and more of the universe, just as time allowed our ancestors to multiply in numbers, and populate more and more of the earth. And as the specific people come and go, their physical bodies will be born, and grow, and die, but their thoughts will remain, and Walt Disney movies, his glorious Air Bud movies, are recorded ideas of his, that will still be here. Even when the Earth is no longer inhabitable, and humanity has long since moved away to bigger planets, they'll carry with them a record we all keep, mark my words, and look at what we've started. What is the internet? What is the online world, if not a record? Never-ending feed of ideas, immortal ideas, forever placed in the ether of dualism. What is an idea? Where does it live? How does it manifest itself? Can it live forever? Will it live forever, outside of these physical husks of ours, our bodies? And Josh Fram, and Air Bud, started merely as thoughts, but they've become so much more. That old cliché rings true, they've taken on a life of their own, and life may not be what we think. Life brings to mind a beating heart, breathing lungs, blinking eyes. But the real life is in our imaginations, and who better embodies the definition of imagination if not a simple boy, a cartoonist, who puts his ideas to paper so that they may live on, so that our children, and our children's children, and their children's children's children can access the wealth of ideas that have accumulated thus far. They will plug themselves into an information grid, and they will have access. They will watch every Air Bud movie. 80,000 years from now, a child will see a simple Josh Fram, watching a pudding. He will feel around for something, but that something is not there. He will lift his head and think, now where could my basketball be? And Air Bud will be smoking the basketball, and Josh will yell Air Bud. And what then? 80,000 years from now? The child watching this movie will smile, and that smile will transcend space and time and the physical limitations of this existence, whatever they may be, however many dimensions exist. There will always be Air Bud, and there will always be its creator. Walt Disney. It is through art, and through art only, that we can realize our perfection. Oscar Wilde. 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 Wilde.